Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Satsang. Let's make some silence first. A seeker of truth has no peace. And he is not looking for peace. Not directly. His peace, his sense of peace, will come from liberation only. Those who look for peace, they are looking for a peaceful life. The seeker of truth looks for home, looks for the source. That's the only peace he will know. Desliga ali depois do freezer. So once again, welcome everyone. Just reminding everyone that we use WhatsApp as a means of communication. You can send your questions, they come directly to me. So usually I speak a lot about seekers of truth and seekers of well-being as something to clarify what makes one and the other. You can find in YouTube channel that series Igniting the Sacred Fires that has 3 to 4 videos just about the seeker of truth. Not just those, but those are specific to that subject. Today I'm going to talk about an aspect, a very important aspect of a seeker of truth, so that you can measure up and have some clarity of where you're standing, if there's something needed to correct. Because sometimes the biggest difficulty in correcting a posture is that you have nothing to compare with. So you take what you're having as normal. So I hear sometimes, especially before seekers watch that series of Igniting the Sacred Fires, because after that they don't speak much about it. But before that, they usually say, oh, I'm a seeker of truth. And usually, sometimes, when this is said, then I ask, so and what are your questions? And sometimes there are questions, many times there are no questions. So, seeker of truth, no questions. Seeker of truth, no questions. What does that mean? Well, it may mean, presumably, two things. Either guidance is there and they are following guidance, or it is in a slumber. So what is a seeker of truth? A seeker of truth is the one which is seeking intensely liberation, who has a thirst for liberation, a very intense thirst for liberation. And because of this thirst, he is applying himself intensely to the quest for liberation, according to what presents to him as a possibility, before guidance, of course. So this being is very thirsty. Is very thirsty. So he cannot rest. He cannot devote himself to something else. He may be doing other things at the same time, but his focus is not there. It's on the quest for truth. And everything else is just supporting that. And as he is applying himself intensely, difficulties will come, obstacles will come, because he is pushing somehow, somewhere, and there will be obstacles, things standing in the way. Either he's not being able to deepen his practice. Can be a lot of different things. And there are some things that he will find the solution, others that he won't. And those that he won't, he will need clarification, guidance. He won't rest until he gets that guidance, that clarification. Because the thirst is there, the urge is there. It's like you're very thirsty for water. And you have a map, not very cleared one, to arrive at the water source. But then you find some problems, some landslides, abysms, well, whatever. And you have to figure it out, a way to go through. You have to use your creativity, ingenuity, and if you don't know, you have to seek someone that has the expertise needed for you to be able to transcend the obstacle which has presented in front of you. And because you really, really want to get to the source, your life depends on it, you will not rest until you do it. So this is the spirit of the seeker of truth. And usually, like I said previously, either that seeker of truth is intensely engaged in his quest, following guidance, or whatever clues he's gotten, and he is working intensely and still hasn't reached the obstacle, but he is walking, so he is pleased because everything is flowing. Or is doing nothing yet, because not pursuing it intensely and not having any doubts, well, that means whatever is there, it's not happening. So it's like more or less when people are in college learning something and they are not using it. They don't need to use it at that moment. There's no doubts. Of course, they are studying, yeah, but there's no doubts. But when eventually they start practicing whatever they have been learning, all doubts will come because they need to put it into practice. And that's what brings the doubts. So, if you're learning meditation or some spiritual discipline, as you are learning it, there may be a few doubts, but not those doubts concerning the practice, the intense practice. And if you don't practice intensely, those doubts will not come. But as you start your intense practice, a lot of doubts will start coming. Because it is alive, you're doing something with that. If you're practicing 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening of meditation, or even 2 hours, that may be the beginning of something, but it depends in what place is that taking and what is being made with the rest of the time. And with an intensity like that, well, very difficult to have doubts. And if you're not focusing in your spiritual path the way you should, doubts will not come. And let's not make confusion. Doubts and curiosities, these are completely different. A curiosity is like you look at a food, does that taste good or doesn't it taste good? And another thing is, you're starving and you need some food. And I have to get to that food, but there's an obstacle. I cannot go overcome it. I need help to overcome it. It's different. A doubt or a curiosity. Doubt is something that you cannot have any rest until you get that answer. You may eat, you may sleep, you may take care of things normally, but that is there, creating restlessness. And you're constantly trying to overcome that, and it's not possible. Curiosities, well, people are full of that. But doubts are different. Curiosities may be random, may be about a lot of different subjects. A doubt is specifically connected to that obstacle which you are facing now, that has come because of your intensity. And the thirst is still there. So as the thirst is there and you're not able to move forward, thirst will increase, restlessness will increase, until you're able to finally transcend that, overcome that, understand that. Curiosity, a doubt, usually is as it is cleared, it is followed by silence and more intensity. A curiosity usually is followed by another curiosity, and it doesn't bring more intensity because it doesn't have a practical application. And it's not coming because of this practical application also. So, if you consider yourself a seeker of truth, then by these examples, you can have a feedback if you really are a seeker of truth, or you should be investigating that a little bit better. Because never, never, never forget that self-deception is one of the biggest and strongest arms of illusion. Self-deception. Not deception by others, but your own deception. You should never forget that. Because if you forget that, very little chances of you getting back your focus. Another big difference that brings these different experiences is that the seeker of truth, more or less, is walking the unknown. What does this mean? It means that whenever he overcomes something, he is presented to something else, to a new set of circumstances that will allow him to go deeper. So he's always walking through uncharted territory until he becomes accustomed to live in uncharted territory. The seeker of well-being usually is more or less on the known, on his comfort zone. So it is different. So as you transcend one obstacle, another one will come, because as you are putting intensity, the universe is responding with the circumstances for you to remove as many blocks as possible, to break as many beliefs as possible. So circumstances may change very fast. And the more intense you are, the more fast these things change. And as beliefs are being broken, falling apart, another set of circumstance will come to allow more deeper beliefs to be dealt with. So, in a sense, it's like you never know what you're doing, really. With time, you start to understand, to get used to, more or less, of living into the uncharted, into fragility. It becomes a natural thing. But for that to be possible, a lot of fears, insecurities, attachments must have not fall behind. Well, that was difficult. Because if it didn't fall behind, you will not be able to get used to it. You will continue to fight against it, fight and fight and fight and fight against it. And this is something which is very common for the majority of seekers, it's like an instinctive reaction to preserve circumstantial peace, to not expose themselves to uncertainties, insecurities, unknown. It's an instinctive reaction that, because of the thirst, the seeker of truth overcomes. It's like always jumping into an abyss, no parachutes, just pure faith. Faith, not that everything will be fine in the sense of circumstantial protection, security, not that. Everything will be fine according to my needs for spiritual growth, for detachment, for karma balancing, for whatever. God knows what He's doing. So I accept the outcome, no matter what it is, sweet or bitter. I accept it. And I embrace whatever comes as the best for my spiritual growth, knowing fully well that if I'm still blind, there must be a lot of bitterness waiting for me because I'm blind. So my structures, my illusion, my vision of reality is illusion-based. And to break this, the land must tremble. And as you are living the uncharted, it's a completely different way of seeing and experiencing things. And for sure, for this seeker of truth, his quest for truth is the most important thing. And this is clearly seen in the little decisions day by day, because everything is centering around this. And this is the most important aspect of the life of the seeker. Everything else is just small satellites that are there as a circumstantial factor which can enable more circumstances that enhance this passion. So this is how the world is seen and lived. Eventually, doubts may cease a little bit as maturity comes, but that's only in a level of intensity very high, very high. What usually happens is, yes, I'm a seeker of truth. That means it is a hobby in my life, but first I'll overcome material insecurity. I will take care of material needs, material aspects. And whatever time is left, I dedicate it to my quest for liberation. That means 2%, 5%, 10% at most, and it's a high number for the majority, but okay, 10% at most. So it's quite different, quite different. Like those ideas, which are very good ideas. Oh, I had a very materialistic life. Now I found out spirituality. Let me make it a profession and earn my living through that. So you have picked up a door that has opened, that would supposedly take you to higher grounds, and you have transformed it in the same that you had previously to satisfy the same worldly needs, but convincing yourself that it is for the spiritual opportunities that come. And this is quite normal phenomenon also. So there are curiosities and doubts, and these are more or less the differences. So another aspect, another topic which is important and was part of a question is faith. What is the part of faith? Well, faith in God, faith in the Guru, faith in yourself. What is the part of that? What's the importance? And sometimes I listen this, so I have faith, or I need to work on my faith. And this is correct. But usually this faith is full of expectations, if possible. If faith is possible, it's usually full of expectations. And sometimes it is said that, but I have faith in you. Or like people that are in love for each other, they say, oh, but I love you. Don't you see the importance of me loving you? Well, faith and love, they share more or less the same common trait. It is a profit for the one who is experiencing it, not to where it is directing it. So if you're feeling love, if you're having love with someone, you're having the love. So it is your benefit. With faith is the same thing. You're the one who needs to have faith in God and in the Guru, because, or else how can you will be able to transcend your difficulties and your obstacles? God doesn't need your faith, neither does the Guru needs your faith. You're the one who needs it, because that's the only thing that allows you to move from where you are to where you need to be. Because it is like jumping into an abyss. So, for the seeker of truth, which is really clear about his thirst, his intense thirst, who feels intensely the call for liberation, this question of I have faith doesn't even count. It doesn't. It's like, okay, let's go back to the same example of being in love. So when a worldly person is in love by someone else, and that love is very intense, very intense, very intense, the question of having faith that the other will respond is useless, because that love is so strong that that person is compelled to trying to get to the other person, trying to get the other person to love him back, trying to be with the other person. It will not be able to have any peace. That love will be very unsettling. So there is no question of faith in this case, because you desperately need it. And you will try your level best to make it happen. So this question of faith, it comes prior to that stage in a spiritual context. Because when the seeker of truth is really clear and his calling is very intense, it doesn't matter. Faith doesn't matter, because he knows he's the one who needs it. And there's no doubt that God is there, divine is there, source is there. There cannot be any doubt, because if it isn't, I will die, I will explode, everything will be useless, tasteless. So that question of having faith that exists, it doesn't make any difference, because the longing is very intense. So this is only possible, it's only something important as you're still full of yourself. You haven't realized the importance of the calling, and you're still surrounded by very precious things that you give a lot of value, that are there sustaining your security, that may be shaken for you to see as a blessing. But if you're having questions about faith and you need to work on your faith, it's because you're not experiencing this intense thirst, or it's not possible for you to experience it because you're holding on to a lot of safeties. So in this case, we can talk about faith. But having faith, what is called faith, is it's much higher, and it comes at a very intense level of your spiritual path, as an embodied experience, as a practical thing. And that faith, if it is there intensely, it means your heart is active, alive, intense. It is overflowing with love, with abundance. And that is your benefit, no one else's. So this idea of even experiencing strong love, strong devotion, and saying, "Oh God, but I love you," or "Guru, but I love you, and I love you." Like, why don't I have certain experiences when I love you, when I'm surrendering to you? Why? Don't you see that I love you? Don't you see that I'm surrendering? Don't you see how I love you, and I love you, and I love you? Don't you see your interest in my love, how my love is so important that you should be bringing heaven down here to my feet because I love you? This is the mental state of many seekers who actually go through the first stage of being more or less dead, no life, then to experiencing faith, devotion, a little bit. And as these expectations are here, it limits the potential for the size of it, of the intensity of it. So these expectations, God will have to frustrate them, Guru will have to frustrate them, so that they may die and true love, true devotion, pure, may arise fully. The calling. The calling is a blessing. Of course, there must be some maturity, but it's not on that level of maturity, big maturity, just a little bit, even if it is from the fruits of experience itself, which is there to mature you to the point of you understanding in a deeper sense, not exactly at a conceptual sense, that life has no meaning whatsoever, that it is useless. So the calling is a blessing. And this is important. Why? Because of a question. I'll translate. How can I overcome the great frustration of living blindly, ruled by the system of illusion, looking away from the calling to consecrate myself? I don't know if there is forgiveness for that sin, but I know that it is really difficult. And for me to forgive myself and have the courage to move on, restarting the path again. I see the lack of humbleness when I recognize myself in front of that ignorance. Well, of course. It's a more or less known thing in the spiritual environments, especially when it's about therapy, that forgiving yourself, moving on, is a part of the natural cycle of life. True, but what does this mean? Because if you stop life, if you're not able to move on, you'll be stuck there and you'll not be having the experiences, the next experiences that tell you clearly that there's nothing worthwhile here. And you will not get that maturity to move on. This is not interpretation. Interpretation is because, well, it's about enjoying life. So you need to move on to enjoy life, to be healthy, to enjoy life, to be happy, to enjoy life, so on. You get the idea. But this is a vision from which it is through circumstances that you get the best in life. And as you are more resolved, as you are more light, well, you can experience more happiness in your life. And that is true at a very superficial level, because that's not the point. This is fighting against the purpose of nature, even if it doesn't seem to be that way. If circumstantial happiness was the highest of human evolution, then that would be correct. But if it isn't, if human life as it is known, it is a distraction from the highest, from the real purpose of life, then it becomes a fallacy. And this idea of enjoying circumstances, looking for happiness through them, it's deception based. So moving on really means, if you're not stuck and you move on, you continue to have the experiences needed for you to understand that there's nothing worthwhile there, and have the opportunity to move to higher grounds, to aspire for liberation. This is what it means. But those who have the calling, they have been called to the highest of the highest. And that calling in itself is a blessing. The next blessing is finding guidance. That is the second blessing. But these are blessings. And when you look at the blessing and you don't embrace it, these kinds of blessings, they are very different in nature. So, where will you move on? So you're stuck at a place because you have disrespected your spiritual calling all your life. Where do you want to move on? That is a very easy answer. You want to move on to the next cycle, same old cycle, in which you have been all these years. And for that, you need certain key ingredients. You need a new set of circumstances where you can believe that you are on the right track, that you can invest, but at the same time, where you can do all what you have done until now, again and again and again and again and again and again. So you need to be able to find those circumstances where you're after milk and you're going to milk the cow, but secretly you aspire for orange juice. So there must be a way through that cow to milk some orange juice, because this is what you've been doing. So when you're at the worldly level, in worldly experiences, this thing of forgiveness and all of that, it works like I've explained, with that purpose. But when you reach this higher sphere, it doesn't work that way. First, why have you fallen? Why haven't you been able to continue? Well, because somewhere in yourself, you're not being able to have a clear vision of the importance of liberation and the sacredness of that calling. Because, for sure, too much arrogance, too much naive ideas, and a lack of experience. But as life is ending, perspective changes. And the fruits of what you've been doing, they are there, they are coming. And you're having a very big difficulty in accepting those fruits. You're still in the mode, plantation mode. I have to plant somewhere else. This is not good here. Have to move on to keep on doing what I was doing previously. But now it's ripping the fruits, harvesting the fruits. But you want to move on because you want to take that weight off your back and renew the same cycle that you have been going through all your life. And if everything that you knew didn't help, what does this moving on that you're talking about will help? If you're lucky, you see, the calling and the guidance that comes and usually is ignored by the same reasons you ignore the calling. This is the path of love, of blessing. And if the purpose is liberation only, if you don't accept the path of love, you will embrace the path of suffering. Because in higher aspects of your being, it is clear what the purpose is. So anything but liberation is pain, is suffering, is condemnation, whatever you want to call it. At the level of personality, it's not like that. It's, well, if I can have this, I will have this. Well, but at higher aspects of your being, it doesn't work like that. Anything but liberation is a loss, is a pain, and distraction from that path is wasting time. So, whatever you didn't get by love, that guilt that you're feeling, that frustration that you're feeling, this is last blessing, because nothing else worked so far. And if that frustration, that love, can create a deep-seated sanskar that either in this life or the next one will arise intensely with the needed importance connected to the spiritual calling, that when it comes, when the calling comes, when guidance comes, you'll be able to honor it with all your being and not waste time with anything else. So these painful experiences, they are usually last blessing because none else worked so far. And it's like when you're deprived, there's something very important. You will really, really start having a glimpse. If it is really important, it will become very, very important to the level of being precious. Precious things you don't let go. For you to let go something precious, it must have lost some value. Doesn't mean that it isn't important, but it lost some value because it's not precious anymore and you can let go. When it's precious, or even beyond that, vital, you will hold on to it with all your being. And this has to reach a point that if you put in a scale liberation or the life of the body, and one goes against the other, that without hesitancy, liberation. But this doesn't come like this. Usually it comes with circumstances that threaten the life of the body, and for you to go beyond, you need to let go of that also. This is the level that it needs to reach. But if you're a VIP seeker, in this case VIS, very important seeker, then you're collecting pearls. You're not looking for oxygen to survive. You're collecting pearls to put into your collection, to increase the stock of your treasure. And if you get it, you get it. If you don't get it, well, I still have a lot of it. It's no problem. I'll just keep looking. So it's different. So suffering is the last blessing for everyone. It's not a punishment. And where nothing else made the difference, suffering will. And if you see that, oh, so God is punishing me because I didn't answer the calling, because I was neglecting the calling. This is being mistaken, because it's your need. And if this comes from somewhere, it's from your higher being, of sure, not from God. Because personality is an instrument of that highest expression. And the purpose of life serves that highest expression, not the personality. Personality is a fruit of circumstances. That's it. Your higher self, what is called the soul or whatever, has its own purpose, which this vehicle should be serving. God doesn't need anything from you. So, in a very narrowed mental conception, suffering is a punishment. And we have a lot of people in spirituality trying to eradicate suffering. But suffering is not punishment. It is opportunity. It is the last blessing, meaning that all other blessings have failed. So suffering is there to create an impression so deep, that when you face those circumstances again, you won't neglect them, and you'll be able to move deeper and deeper, or higher and higher. From this level, where do you move on to? There's no moving on to. Moving on to just means resuming the same cycles of distraction and illusion. So, in worldly terms, this moving on means healing, to grow and continue to have experiences, so that I realize the emptiness behind them. And it doesn't matter if they frustrate my goals, or if they fulfill them. If they are worldly goals, the emptiness will be revealed out of them. So it is moving on for more suffering, having the illusion of happiness, and moving on for more suffering. This is what therapy is about. Putting people, renewing their hopes to put them through more suffering. So pardon my French. But that's what it is. That's what it is. If you are really disillusioned, how will you delude yourself again and have one more shot, one more experience of emptiness, so that the aspiration of your soul may become strong, perceptible. And as you become distasted with, and I'm not sure if this word exists, but without any taste for these experiences, and aspiring only the highest. So, therapy, ladies and gentlemen. in worldly terms, worldly life, worldly people. And when I say worldly, I'm not even counting those who are not engaged in spiritual practices. No. Just talking about those who are into a spiritual context, into spiritual practices. But through them, they are taking and nurturing these worldly values. And for them, it's like colonies of ants eating the scraps under a table without understanding that those are just scraps and there's something very, very higher than that going on on top of the table. Okay. So for today, that's it. Next satsang will be Wednesday, 9:30 in the morning, Brazilian time, UTC -3. Until then, make the best use of your time. Make it real.